I'm so excited. I have the opportunity to bring Susan Marrufo here to the podcast. And Susan, well, first of all, I just want to ask you just to get started here, like, how are you feeling today? How's your day going so far?
Oh my gosh, it's interesting that you asked me because I have spent
Uh-oh.
all day with a toddler. Um,
Good
I don't
answer.
have I don't have
Say no
children of
more.
my
Oh,
own.
oh, okay. Oh, fair enough.
No, I don't have children of my own, and days like today are reminders of why I don't. But one of my good friends, I just spent the day with them. And this little one, he's just amazing. He has my heart. And when I get home, I'm exhausted. So it's 7:40 p.m. for me. I know that I'm ahead of you because I'm in Spain.
Yeah.
But man, it's like a whirlwind. I feel like I just was in a whirlwind today, and I'm like, oh.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm kind of just chilling
Yes.
out. I'm
As
in
a
the calm down.
Oh, yeah, cool. I'll help you. As a parent myself, I think one of the best advice we could give anybody that's not a parent is to do what you just did. Borrow a kid, not borrow, what's the right way to say this? Like, ask a good friend if you can help
Yes.
them. Can you help them for
Yes.
the day and watch them and really get a feeling for, yeah, this is what you're signing up for, full time, full on, nonstop. But that's cool. That's really great. I love hearing that. That makes me smile just because it is a lot of work.
But I do have this question about, I wonder if it's different if it's yours, right? Like, I don't know.
Yes,
I
it is.
imagine that it
Yes.
does take still an enormous amount of patience. But I would imagine that if it was my own kid, it might be a little bit different than if I get to be the auntie
Yeah.
and get out of there, but I don't know how it would be if it was my own.
Well, I think the big difference is like when you're auntie, and auntie is kind of like playing grandparent, and I'm not a grandparent, but from what I understand, you're giving that child back. So the time that you're with them, you're just like really like, okay, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to engage with, you know what I mean?
Right.
I got a short
Yes.
window. This might be challenging.
Right.
I'm chasing this kid all over, but I'm gonna try. Whereas a parent, it's less fun because you
It doesn't end.
it doesn't. No, I'm joking. I love being a parent. It is totally amazing. So, but it's yeah. I mean, you just got to be honest. It's full on. Well, that's a good answer. Thank you so much. The subject matter that we're going to go down today, which I'm so excited. The title somewhere around about yoga, sacred sexuality, and death. And when I first got your message, my first thought was like, ooh, that's a those are some heavy subjects. The yoga part, not so well, yoga is actually really heavy. The funny thing is that the word yoga, I think sometimes we think that's a light subject, but then talking about sacred sexuality and death might be a heavy subject. But I kind of
Right.
see yoga really can be even deeper and heavier. Just depends on what sort of level we want to dip down in on it. But in relation to,
Yes.
say, sacred sexuality and death, sometimes I think maybe people are going to go, oh gosh, I don't want to think about that today, or oh, I don't want to hear about sex. But then I thought, no, that's actually probably what people really want to hear about because it's so poignant. Like, and when it's like a little bit taboo to talk about sex, it's a little bit taboo to talk about death. And I don't think it's taboo to talk about yoga, but maybe for some people it is. So, with that being said, would you agree with me? And is that why you are so focused on actually honing in on these specific topics?
Well, yes, I definitely agree with you in that people really get either drawn, magnetized, or repelled by the name and the title, yoga, sex, and death. And I have several women, because now it's just for women. I have several women who have come to the course and they said the name. When I heard like every single one of those things, yoga, sex, death, I wanted to run. And that's actually when I knew that this is something that would probably benefit me. And yeah, so it is, I think it's polarizing. I think it's you either are scared of it and run in the opposite direction, or you feel like there's definitely something in there for me. Now, in terms of, I think yoga, I agree with you also in that for many people, the word yoga might not be so heavily loaded like the word sex is and the word death is, but for me, they are all equally intense. And because the course actually is a curriculum that I created that models my own personal journey. So it's something that is reflective of where I've been and what I've learned. And I gotta say, I don't think one of those cycles of my life has been easier than the other. Because it was like that. It was like first I came to yoga, and then my yoga practice brought me to a discovery of my sexuality and practicing with sexuality. And then death kind of happened in little bits all along the way. Like death to me is inherent in yoga, and it's also inherent in sex and sexuality. So, and we can talk more about what I mean about all of that, but all three of them, this is it in a nutshell. This is the connection between the three of them. And that's that all three, at least how I have experienced it, is all three of them are portals to God or whatever word you want to use, to source, to the absolute, to the divine, to pure consciousness. Um, all of those three things are portals for me. And so we just we get into it in yoga, sex, and death, and how yoga is a portal, how sex can be used consciously as a portal, and also death is an opportunity as well. So
Amazing. And just so the listener can understand the way that you are teaching this course is one option is through your online course that you offer, which there's a link below that they can check out. But then you also offer retreats, I believe you said, and then there's something that you offer in California as well. Is that true?
yes, it is true, partially true. So the 6-week course in Los Angeles is actually taught. I have trained facilitators to teach this course, and one of the women who she's just amazing, and we've been working together now for so many years. I've trained her to teach this course, and she is the one that is now teaching yoga, sex, and death in Los Angeles, the 6-week format in person. And I am now teaching only the in-person intensive retreat.
Got it.
And so for anybody who is like, okay, well, I want to test out the curriculum first, that all seems maybe like a little bit too much for me, or I'm just curious, I want to dip my toe in. There is an online on-demand course called Yoga, Sex, and Death Basics with just the foundational concepts of what we're going to do in the in-person. For anybody that feels more comfortable doing it alone and in the privacy of their own home.
Cool. On that note, I'm gonna attempt to structure our time together relatively wisely and first start off with the subject of yoga. And can you just share a little bit about what yoga means to you? Like how are you getting to know yourself better through learning yoga practices?
This is Todd, my favorite thing to talk about. um, so when I say the word yoga, I think what I've realized is that it might be different than what most people think of when they hear the word yoga. Although I do practice asana, and I have been for 25 years now, I I think more of yoga as um, a system for self-realization. And there's different paths of yoga, and I don't know how deep in the woods we want to in the weeds we want to get here, but with the different paths of yoga. But I feel more of drawn to a path called jnana yoga, which is yoga of direct knowledge, which just means the direct experience of who I am, not something that somebody has taught me or what I've read in a book, but it's direct knowledge. So not I imagine, you know all of this, but for anybody listening, not the kind of knowledge that's another mental concept, but the actual direct experience of truth, truth of being. And so one of the ways that I do that, and I've done for years, is to inquire into the nature of self. I'm a person of questions, not answers. And that's how I guide people, because I can't ever know what's right for somebody else. But what I can do is create a space for somebody to get quiet and sit in that question and meditate in that question of, who am I? Who am I? And when I first came about that kind of yoga, the jnana yoga, like Ramana Maharshi, it was just a meditation of actually sitting and asking the question, who am I? And listening. It's like the mind asks the question and then the heart reveals. So it's not like you get this answer from the mind, but you sit quietly and listen to the silence, really. So after years of doing that, I was teaching that, and I was, I think people were like, what the fuck? I mean, like, what does that mean? She wants me to just sit here and like, it's a little bit hard, for the modern mind, and the mind is just moving so fast, and we have so many distractions, and I think that's not so relatable. That's how I found it to be, trying to teach this technique of like, who am I? But that's ultimately jnana yoga, is the coming undone, all of the things that I'm not, to reveal the truth of who I am. And then I found the work of Byron Katie, and she's got another kind of system of questions that's a little bit more for the mind to work with. So it's not just this one question of who am I, like Ramana Maharshi's meditation, but it's like it's like, is it true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? How do you react when you believe the thought? Who would you be without the thought? And then you do the turnarounds. So it's a little bit more, for a few more questions, a few more swords to cut through the things that the ego would have you be convinced of.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so it's
Very cool. I mean, in a world where if you're trying to make a living as a yoga teacher, teaching asana classes are what people come to expect. So I'm curious, when you started teaching this method of self-inquiry, were you setting up on, well, you used to run a yoga studio, so would you put on the class schedule, this is a self-inquiry class, or would you just call it like yoga and then people would show up with their yoga mats ready to like bust out some Virabhadrasana, and all of a sudden you said, no, sit down, please. I want to know who you are.
that's such a
But
good that's such a good question. Because I worked in a yoga studio so many years ago, and the owner, we are now very good friends, but back in the day I was teaching like death on death and stuff. I was teaching yoga nidra as like a practice for death, because that's how I learned it. And he was like, the owner was like, maybe you'd leave the death stuff out, and and I told him, okay, fair enough, but that's not in integrity for me, so I just stopped teaching it. And he's like, okay, well, when you have your studio. And then so I then did have my own studio years later. And I did not do, like, I called it mental yoga, is what I called it. And we would do
cool.
just like one workshop a month. And I still do it to this day. I still, for our members, for Samarasa members, I still do once a month, like um, a whole day of mental yoga, which is exactly what you're. So no, I don't think I could have gotten away with that in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
Like, come do yoga. And then once they get there, I'm like, okay, now everybody sit down. And but there's ways to weave it into asana classes, and I would do that.
absolutely. That's so cool. I really respect Ramana Maharishi's whole everything, his books, his writings, his teachings. It's amazing, isn't it? I'm curious if I'm sure your answers to the question have evolved. I don't know that you necessarily want to try to verbalize who you now feel your connection to yourself is, but if you were to go about, say, 7 times asking yourself the question, who am I? What would be an example of how like you would answer that? Like if the first one you say, who am I? What's the typical like response either you or you've noticed your students would come back with first?
Oh, well,
Like
it
your
depends
name?
on
Like
who's answering,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah,
um,
but maybe for you, like if I asked you, I know like if you were asking who am I, what would be the first answer you would say?
well, what comes, I can tell you how it works for me.
Yeah,
I
please.
just
That's
sit,
what I'd like to
I
know.
sit
Yeah.
on my cushion
Mhm.
and all the stories come of who I think I am and all the images of the past
Yeah.
of the Susan who was with a toddler all day long, and the Susan who lived in Seville 15 years ago, and the Susan who did this, and the Susan
Yeah.
and all of these fantasies of the future, all the things that I want that I don't have, and all of that stuff comes up. I mean, it's just the mind moving. I
Yeah.
ask the question, "Who am I?" and it's just like all of the mental images of, "Oh, this is who you are."
Yes.
This image, right? This image imagination that I have in my own mind of who I think I am.
Yeah.
And that's the mind answering the mind. And that's what happens to me a lot.
Yep.
And then there's something else that happens also when the grace just allows for it. And it's silence. It's something that is inclusive of, but also beyond that level of mind. It's
Do you think when you keep whittling it down, you get to a point where words can't?
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
You become
words,
silent or speechless because you just
there's no one there.
yeah.
And that's the death,
Yeah.
Todd.
Nice.
That's the death.
There we go. Yeah.
That's it.
So
There's no one there.
what was the hmm, you had this sort of realization. When was that for you? When did you have your first, for lack of a better term, I know there's so many loaded terms. Like sometimes you'll say the word enlightenment, and someone will say, I don't like the word enlightenment. I prefer awakening. And then you say the word awakening, and it's kind of like, that gets clumped into other movements. And I'm not wanting to be like dogmatic about this whole idea of like having some sort of self-realization. And then even self-realization, you think, oh, Paramahansa Yogananda. And then, there's like this, so does somebody own that term? And which school are we now affiliating with by saying, so I realized all that, but I'm curious, what, when was that for you? Do you have a clear, was there a moment or has it been a gradual and it's just slowly evolving? How could you speak about that?
There were some big moments for me, more like a time in my life. And then since then, it's just been a gradual undoing. But I was married and I worked in advertising and I lived in Dallas, Texas, and I was also just drinking myself to death, basically. I was drinking so much, and it's one of those stories where it's like, oh, I did all the things. I have all the things, this amazing, beautiful husband, this house, the job, all the things, check, check, check. And I was just so unhappy and I had no idea why. And so I knew that I had to do something. And I had exhausted every tool that I had at that time. So I had to do something I'd never done before. And I left the States and I quit my job and I just took a big pause on my marriage and I moved to Sevilla, Spain, which is where I find myself now 15 years later. And I took myself out of the cultural conditionings that I had built around me. I mean, the confines of that nobody did it but me, right? Um, but it was just like, who am I if I'm not this person's wife, or these people's daughter, or these people's boss, or this person's employer, or this person's sister? Like, who am I outside of all this? Who would I be, and what does that look like? And so I just left and went to a place that I didn't know anyone, and could could answer that question, who am I? Um, I could just give myself some space to really sit in that question. And I definitely don't say everybody has to do that. And I'm not I'm not a go do this. I'm
I get it.
Everyone's on a different trip. Yeah.
Mm.
Um but but it was a time when was getting really into my yoga practice, and meditation practice, and it was a year of awakening. It was a year, and I was just having all of these experiences that I didn't have language for. I didn't have a sangha. I didn't have yogis in my life. I wasn't a part of any. It was just kind of this private own little secret world that I had, and I was just but I was going with it and just going deeper and deeper. And throughout that year, I just wow, there were a lot of things transpiring. And then from there, I went and found a community and in Thailand, and I lived in this tantric community for many years. Um, and I realized, oh my gosh, there's words for this. There's language for this. These are actual teachings that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. And I think it's super cool that I got to experience it first without the trappings of the conceptual mind,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the things that we can do to each other in spiritual community sanghas, like, you know anything that the mind, any concept the mind can use against itself. And um so then that took me to the sexual exploration, um and that was just a whole other, that's the part two.
So on that note, then what why was the sexual exploration necessary? Were you yes, learning that you had a different sexual orientation than you had assumed, or was it more just your own personal relationship?
Oh,
Understand.
yes.
Yeah.
It was my own personal relationship. So just to put it into very concrete terms so people can understand, like in the context of their own lives. I mean, I was married, I was in my 20s, and we were together for 11 years. But I had also been drinking a lot, right? Like I said, and I hadn't learned at that point in my life how to be with myself, how to feel. Really, I was dissociated, and I was numbing with alcohol and just armoring up my body, just holding things in. And yoga brought me back to my body. It was like, wow. And that year that I'm talking about, it was just so much crying. There was, in my practice every day, I was moving the body and my body in asana, and it was just so much coming up, energy, emotion just flowing, and all of the things that I had been trying to suppress for so long.
At that point, did you make a conscious decision to not partake in alcohol, or were you in a meandering spot?
I was in a meandering spot. I was still drinking some, but I slowed down, because my husband didn't come with me, but we remained married. And I just thought, what if he wasn't around to pick up the pieces? Would I just end up dead on the side of the road? And um, so I had an awareness to slow down, and I did slow down a lot. And I was doing a lot of practice. So, but every now and then I'd go out and drink. And then when I got to Thailand, that's when it stopped. It's like it just left me, which is a whole other story. But that time in Spain was like a bardo, it was like a transition. It was the wormhole that took me from this version of Susan to like the version that I've been living now for the 15 years.
Yes.
Um, so I was very disconnected from my own body, and therefore I couldn't really connect with my husband at the time in lovemaking in any way. It's intimacy, really. It's about intimacy. Yoga taught me intimacy, and then it's like, okay, now how do I take this intimacy and let it translate into love making, not just with me, but with another person? And, it might sound so simple and like, duh, but it was a lifelong journey of healing to do that.
Yeah. It's good that you made
And
that connection. That's interesting.
yes, and it can and continues to be. But there was a lot of exploring there. I knowing that there was trauma in my body holding, my body was holding on to, that I just had been too scared and to deal with. And thankfully there was so much wisdom. Our nervous systems are so wise, and it's like, just not now. Now's not the time. It reveals itself when it's time. And so it did. I was ready, and there was a lot of exploration and investigation and experimenting that I was just ready for. Um, and it's really about intimacy, and it's about learning to work with your own energy. And it's yoga, really, it's a conscious practice of intimacy with my whole system: body, energy, emotions, mind, spirit, um, and then the union, the dissolving, merging with another into one, which is yoga's aim. And it's also the same thing, that merging. It's the merging that I was talking about, the death of, like, there's no one there. And same thing with sexuality. It's just dissolving into love, really. That's what yoga is. That's what sex is. That's what death is. Um,
Yes.
okay, so I'll pause.
No. No, you're doing great. You're doing great. Don't stop. You
I
need
thought
another
you were
question?
about to say
I'll throw another one at you.
no, no. I thought you were about to
Well,
say something, so
I
I
okay.
can
I
go,
will.
man.
I
I can
will.
just
I
talk.
will.
So you
I
need to
will.
kind of
I'll
rein me
throw
in
in.
if you want.
I'll throw in. I'll throw something in.
Okay, okay.
So then what I'm noticing is that there's this fascination in the West where if someone has let's say an over sexualized sort of persona where all they
Yes,
can do is like, I need sex, I need sex, I need sex. And then they
yes,
hear like Tantra, and then they
yes.
attach this idea that, oh, well, I saw some book called Kama Sutra. Someone told me that was a tantric yoga practice, and therefore Tantra equals sex. And then they kind of put this word into it only means sex. But then if we study with true tantrics, be it, say, the Vajrayana path of the Tibetan Buddhist, or if we investigate some of the different, like the tantric paths in northern India, that sex was just one way to be a part of the world and accept the world and not try to like hide from it or renounce from it. So then I'm curious, what has been your journey in relation to your unfolding of understanding Tantra?
Wow, what a journey. So I want to back up and say,
Please.
I went to go live in a tantric community in Thailand, and I was there for many years, on and off. I would spend half the year in that community and the other half in India studying with my teacher at the time, Prem Baba. And so that's how I spent those years. And
Wow.
at the
Wow.
time, I was
Hold on before you go any further. So I'm curious, where was Prim Baba? located? Where?
He in Rishikesh.
Yeah.
We would have a season every year. So he wasn't living there all year long, but he would come for the season and the whole Sangha would go to Rishikesh
And
every
then
season.
where was the group that you lived with in Thailand? Which location?
It was in Kopangan.
Ooh, I love Koh Phangan. I studied with someone named Ralph Naujaka on Koh Phangan over at coast on the you know how you got to take a boat and you take another boat Hadwai Nam. We stayed at Hadwai Nam. Does that ring a bell? The sanctuary.
No. Oh
Sanctuary?
yeah,
Yeah.
the sanctuary. Yeah, for sure.
Hadwai was the
Oh
beach,
yeah.
just one beach over from the sanctuary. Where were you on Koh Phangan when you were in that community? Was it where the boat drops you off, or was it did you have to take another? Because there's a couple different boat rides you can take to get further and further out. I'm curious where that
Um, no, so you just take a boat to Kopangan. You take the ferry, like you fly into Koh Samui, you take a ferry to Kopangan, and then you get on your motorbike or the scooter, and then you just ride into your bungalow. So that's how it was.
Isn't that amazing
Um,
though? Isn't that, what kind of memories do you have of that? I mean, I have the best memories of hanging out there. I was only there
oh
for a
my
month. Like maybe it sounds like I'm really curious to hear about your experience with this community. So I'm just going to stop here and let you keep talking. But I'd like to hear like, was it a good experience? Was it a little iffy? What was your vibe or your thoughts?
this is a lot to process, and I think
Please, please.
it's part of another. Let's see how this goes.
Another podcast, another discussion.
Maybe I think it really is because it's
Yeah,
been years of processing that time of my life.
yeah.
Because at the time it was a place where people went to transgress, really, and to explore boundaries and pushing past boundaries and doing rituals. Okay, but I do want to say that there was so much being taught there under this huge umbrella of Tantra, classical teachings of Tantra, as well as Neo Tantra teachings. And it wasn't, the separation was not distinguished in that community. So it was just kind of all thrown together. And I thought, oh, all of this is just Tantra. And, being on this path long enough, I began to come across scholars, tantric scholars um, of different lineages, and I realized, okay, this is not all tantra. Um, there is some tantra here, but it really was about sifting through and getting my own education and not just getting fed what somebody was teaching to me. That being said, so I always in the things that I say with students, like I make a very clear, I think it's important and it feels responsible to me to make a very clear distinction. There's Tantra and then there's Neo Tantra. And in the teachings of classical Tantra, sexuality is such a very small percentage. I mean, it's tiny. Um, when you get to the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, and it's barely mentioned. So I mean, I had a teacher. I mean, he's still a teacher. I haven't really studied with him in a while, but Christopher Harish Wallace, I'm not sure if you're
Mm,
aware
I have,
of
yeah,
him.
yes.
Okay. So he came over to Samarasa at one point and he was teaching some things there in LA. But I think he's a great contemporary because he's a scholar slash practitioner. And I've learned a lot. I've really learned a lot from Harish. So I think it could point to your listeners, like if you're interested in classical yoga, tantra yoga, then he's a good place to start. And he's got the book Tantra Illuminated that I think that's where I send all of my students. So that being said, there was a lot of neo tantric um, sexual practices happening that I'm so grateful for. That really I went into consciously and there was so much healing to be found there. And so I'm up for it, I'm on board for it, and it's like, and let's just call it sacred sexuality. Like we don't have to call it tantra yoga because to me it's not. you know, if we're
Yeah.
going to a
I
very
think you're right.
specific
I
set
think you're
of
right.
teachings,
Yeah.
which classical yoga is, there's view and practice, right? And there's a very
Yeah.
specific set of practices that are allocated to the classical tradition of Tantra. And then there's Neo Tantra, and it's a different thing.
Yeah. Well, would you agree that maybe Neo Tantra is slightly more culturally appropriated as opposed to the classical Tantra? Do you think classical tantrics would say that Neo Tantra is a way that Westerners have just milked out what they wanted out of the classical Tantra and just said, "Ah, I don't like all that other stuff. That other stuff's not as fun as this stuff. Let's just like take the part that we want to be obsessive about." Does that, am I, does that sound right? Or
No,
am I
I
being
know.
way,
I
way off
hear,
the mark?
I just think it's a zoomed out view,
Yeah.
but everyone is going to have an opinion and ideas about ever
I
everything.
know.
And so, but
Good
yes,
point. Good point.
I
I
mean,
know we're trying to tiptoe and dance around like,
it's whatever I
yeah.
just try, this getting very attached to the way things should be and the way things are. It's like, I mean, this is what it is. And I also see what you're saying, because it seems that we are a very sexually obsessed and repressed and suppressed society, um, which is why sex is sells.
Yeah.
And we're sex obsessed. And so it's easy to sell something by putting this word tantra on it. Like I just kind of I say yoga, sex, and death. I don't call it
Yeah.
really tantra
Yeah.
nothing,
That's
because
smart. That's smart.
um
Yeah. I agree with you on that. That way you can represent it in a way that you feel is authentic to you without saying, I'm now representing all tantra
yes.
across the
uh
spheres of humanity, millennia. Yeah. Smart.
yes.
Smart. I like that you're being as thoughtful as you are. But at the same time, I just want to give you a little bit of credit for it does take some nerve to, if we're repressed, to be willing to try something that isn't, that we've been telling ourselves we should never do. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
maybe
well,
that's a good,
Todd,
yeah, yeah,
it's just like, what do you value? What's driving you? And I was saying I wanted truth. And I was saying I wanted intimacy. And so I was willing to experiment and put myself in practices and challenges if I thought that it would get me closer to either one of those things.
yeah,
And it's like this: most of us say we want intimacy, right? I think most people, if you ask them, would say, yes, I want love. And yes, I want intimacy. But then it's terrifying at the same time, because we're so seduced and intoxicated with our own ideas of what's right and wrong and how people should be and shouldn't be.
yeah, yeah.
And so it means, okay, are you ready to question those ideas, to question your sacred beliefs, to question all of the things that you think you know for sure? I heard this quote the other day that said, the I know mind is a mind of poverty. And it just blew me away. And that's,
I know mind is a
mm,
mind of poverty. Not necessarily my mind is poverty stricken, but what's saying that the nature of mind is to know poverty. Can you help me understand what you mean?
yes, yes, the I know mind, meaning that state of mind
Oh,
that
yeah,
says,
I know mind. Gotcha.
I
Now
know,
I got it. Now I see.
right?
Yep.
I
Yep.
know for sure.
I know. Yeah. Got it.
I'm attached to this concept. I'm attached to
Right.
this identity, right?
Yep.
And the minute you think you know something, you're dead in the water. It's like that's the poverty,
Yes.
right? Because it
Yeah.
means you're not open to the abundance of reality as it is, because there's this obscuration
Yes.
that just comes, and we can't see clearly the richness of reality as it is. Instead, we've got to make a story about it, which is innocent and the way of it. It's human to do it, and it's just about waking up to it.
Yeah.
So that I know mind, right? In relate, I mean, I know for me when I'm in relationship, oh, it comes and it's like, oh, he did not talk to me that way. Or he did not just leave this a mess for me to pick up, or um on and on and on and on the list goes, all of our complaints about and judgments about the other person. And I think when you get the closer you get to somebody, and this is something we deal a lot with in yoga, sex and death, is learning to identify those protective, those ways that we protect ourselves from intimacy, the intimacy that we say that we want. Really, there's just defense mechanisms that come up because it's scary that I might lose ground,
Mm,
right? If I'm not this person who knows like you're this is wrong, and
mm,
um I'm not, you shouldn't treat me that way, and all of these things, um are you willing to lose ground
yeah.
and to truly see another? And in order to do that, it's like I practice on myself all the parts that I want to disown and cut out and shame myself for it. It's like, can I be with them, and can I hold them in tender loving kindness? And then I'll know what it's like to do it and to try it with another person.
Yeah. That's a good point. I like the fact that you're even pointing in the direction that most people, myself included, would think that if I was practicing sacred sexuality by myself, that would be masturbation. But you're not even really alluding to the sexual act itself. You're more focusing on the intimacy of l- really looking at the sides of yourself that that you want to repress, and being intimate with that, which is really an interesting, that would be true tantra to me, or at least my understanding of what I've been instructed as true tantra to be. But you know what I mean? Like that's kind of cool. I like that.
Totally. I mean, yoga, sex, and death is all the bodies, right? Like, the well, these are the ones that we work with: the physical body, the energy body, the emotional body, the mental body, the spiritual body, all multidimensional self, right? We all have a lot of different parts. It's a whole system. I'm not just physical body, Susan. And so we work on the sexual self on all of the different levels. Like, okay, let's talk about what we're talking about right now. Really is the spiritual and the emotional and the mental. And then there's also energetic practices that we do in yoga, sex, and death, with how to be intimate with your own energy and how to use it to have amazing experiences and communion with the divine, the merging energetically, and also with the physical body, like the actual, how do I become unnumb on a physical level? And so we go to all the levels in yoga, sex, and death. It's not because to me that's holistic healing. Yeah.
Yep. I can see the correlation between yoga and death because I feel like because if you start reading about like Buddha's teachings or even Bhagavad Gita teachings in relation to, if you starting to try to come up with ideas about what happens after my death, that type of thing. And is there an afterlife, or is there nothingness or emptiness, and I can see the, but sacred sexuality and death, that's where I'm excited to hear what you're going to say, because I guess I would most often think of sexuality would be, the outcome would be children, procreation, life, continuation of life. Now, obviously, if there's a life, there has to be a death. So we can't acknowledge life without acknowledging death. But I'm just
Yeah, good
curious
one.
at what level you are connecting sacred sexuality with death. Not that you have
Well,
to, not that you have to, but I'd love to
oh,
hear, I'd love to
but
hear
we
if
do.
you have. Have you, can you draw a
Yeah.
line? Can you draw a line from one to the other and then reason how why you can do that line, why you can make that connection?
I can actually do a literal line,
Thank you.
like
I'm
from the
ready.
second chakra up to the heart chakra. It's like up the line of the spine, right? And the Kundalini just rising up. And that energy, as it rises up, it's like an annihilation. It's like the obliteration. It's the merging that we're talking about. So I'm getting on the we're talking energetic level, I guess, right now. That's where we're going, it seems. So it literally is like when this energy starts to rise up from what we'll call the second chakra up to the heart, it's unconsciously for a lot of people. So this isn't something that most people are walking around with, oh my God, this is so fucking scary, right? When they're about to have this orgasm. It's m- more like this unconscious, I'm terrified because it's a dissolving, it's a losing of yourself. And that not only happens in the actual act of lovemaking, but it can happen just with your partner while you're together, close, talking. It's like energy starts to rise. And so, what happens for a lot of people is unconsciously they will um, create problems for themselves. They'll find issues with their partner and they'll say, oh, not the one. And or I need to be free, or this person might be better for me, or and on and on and on it goes in all these patterns. And then we have no idea why we're repeating the same pattern with the same kind of person. But just on an energetic, since you said line, my image went to that. It's an actual thing that happens energetically when sexual energy begins to rise up and meet the heart. There's like a fear of death. The French call orgasm the little death. Le petit mort is what they call it, because an orgasm is a moment for most people, a moment or two of no mind. And it's that formless place. All the problems that you've been having all day, like all of the things of the past and the future that you're worrying about, everything just disappears in the moment of an orgasm because it's the death, it's the merging. And in neo tantric practices, you learn to, okay, well, let's play with that. Let's consciously work with that. If there's a moment of no mind, which is what we practice in yoga, how can we bring that into this lovemaking experience consciously? Like, how do we do it with awareness and practice together? And so two people come together to dissolve into the heart. And you can learn to stretch out that moment of orgasm into a more meditative orgasmic state that can last a lot longer. So where that state of bliss, we can call it, I usually tend to like to stay away from these words like bliss, but um shortcut bliss, this equanimity, it's a particular state that you can practice
Yeah.
with.
Yes.
And it's not like and then you're enlightened and then it's like okay, it's an experience, and then it's over, just like everything, everything ends, it ends. And now how do you go back to your 2-year-old toddler and bring that into the everyday nitty gritty of life? And that's really the idea that I am here for.
Yes. That's cool. Well said. Good answer. I didn't expect that to be an easy answer, but that was well said. Very good. Uh, that made me think. This hopefully doesn't sound strange, but then we could, based on what you said, see the big death, the actual moment. of when we truly let go, that's like the big orgasm. So if
Yeah.
I could somehow, instead of fear my death, because I don't fear
Yes.
orgasm, I look forward to that, right? I'm not fearing it. But it's interesting that you're saying that there are situations, Andrew, yourself, and maybe I'm not looking at something. So perhaps I do have fear around it that I'm unaware of. But do is it do you, would are there do you come across situations where people are fearful of orgasm because of their fear of death, that there's a connection between.
No, how it manifests is more of like a problems in relationship
Mm,
that most people have. And people don't teach this stuff. Like I didn't know any of this. And then I just really got deep into this work many years ago with my teacher in India. It's psycho spiritual work. It's shadow work is another way that to say it.
what was that word you said? Data work?
Oh, shadow work.
Shadow. I thought you said data, and I'm like, oh, data. Wait, yeah,
I'm like, what is
like
that?
analyzing data.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of
It
data
is
to
kind of,
analyze, but yeah,
yeah, right. It is
shadow
kind
work.
of
Thank
like
you.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Shadow work. It's just like looking at the stuff that I've been avoiding and letting myself feel it and expanding my energetic container to sit with it and allow myself to feel it. And that's the yoga also. Um, so where where was I? Where were we here?
we're just traversing the three main aspects of your work, yoga. I feel
Death.
like
No,
we
but there
spoke
was,
about sexuality, then we went to death. We were drawing a line from sacred sexuality to death. We mentioned the big letting go. Oh yeah, you
oh,
mentioned
yeah,
the fear about.
right.
Yeah, sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's where we were. That's where I was. So it manifests in like very day-to-day um experiences, like relationship problems. And that the most people that come to me, that's where we're at. It's like they just want to have a better relationship with their partner. They're not saying I'm afraid to merge, I'm afraid of death, I'm afraid of dissolving into intimacy with my husband. Like people aren't really saying that. Or with my partner. It's because it's so unconscious. That's why I brought up the shadow work. So for anybody listening that might not know, shadow work is basically just bringing to light the things that are not in the light. They're in the shadow of the unconscious. So we're not aware of it. A lot of us, we're just rolling around in our relationships, thinking, yeah, I've healed all my childhood trauma and wounds. And what I tell my students is like, one way to tell if you've healed all of your wounds is like there's no problems in your relationship and it's just like the flow. And I don't know one person that has a relationship like that. And so myself included, by the way. So I'm not sitting here selling myself. It's like, oh, I don't know. It's a,
Yeah.
it's a, it's just a process, right? It's
Yeah.
of looking and really getting into the things that we're believing, the stories that we have, the things that we carry unconsciously, and so that you can stop repeating the patterns that you just can't figure out. Like, why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep dating the same person with a different face and name? And why, a lot of it is unconscious. And so yoga, sex, and death is just very specifically curated and designed to help people see their blind spots,
Yeah.
right? It's hard to do when it's unconscious. It's unconscious.
Yeah, because you're making me think now that why why would this be a difficult subject? And if I were to try to answer why, my initial reaction when I saw the subject matter was like, uh-oh, is because I was raised Catholic and there was a lot of anti-sex rhetoric in that religious ideology. And it was very repressive. It was very like, it's, you should feel shame about it. You should be, just don't. and then the weird, and then we won't even go into the whole altar board element, you know, and all that stuff that goes down in that whole scene, which is just even more bizarre. So, um,
Shadow.
it-
That's what you call a shadow, a
yeah,
shadow of a religion. Shadow aspect.
interesting. The religious element is what casts that initial shadow.
Oh, well, I'm saying any group, any organization, any religion, anytime you get a bunch of people together, there's going to be the shadow, the distortion, the things like I thought you were alluding to in the Catholic Church of, what was happening in the Catholic Church, and because it's so suppressed.
Yeah, so
And
suppressed.
so it comes out in a distorted way, but
Yeah,
unconsciously. So that is the effect on a group scale, a religious scale, of what happens when people don't address their own individual personal shadow, the things that we want to hold on, not see about ourselves.
yeah, good point. Wow. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So then you made mention, now it makes sense to me that your retreats, you said you work with women only. That makes sense to me. I would imagine if you try to do mixed sex retreats, it could turn into something maybe a lot different. Can
I
you,
tried.
yeah,
I, I
tell me.
I tried once. It's been a journey with me in teaching about sexuality. I was at one point teaching both women and men, and then it went to all women. And then I thought, maybe I'll try it again. And I had a co-lead who I thought could also really hold a very strong container with me. And we would separate sometimes, and the guys would go with the guys, and the women would go with the women. So this retreat is specifically for male bodies and female bodies, because there's anatomical things that that we do in the retreat. There's no nudity, okay? I don't want to freak anybody out, but so he would go with the men and I would go with the women, and it's just so different. It's just such a different
Understood.
field, and
Yeah.
I just felt like, I think for what I'm doing, I think all women for now is what is suiting me the best.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. You're honoring what you're figuring it out. What works? What works
For sure.
best for you? Yeah, not
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, because I'm very protective of the field that we have in yoga, sex, and death.
Yeah.
It's a very strong field, and I know that I've got to take care of myself to kind of hold that field and be at the center of it. So if everything ripples out from here, and so I've just got to really stay in integrity and stay in alignment with what I feel is right for
Yeah.
me, so that the rippling can be of pure motive, you know.
Have you had any experiences where you went, "Uh-oh, this is outside of my control," or "Uh-oh, I'm in a little deeper than I wanted to get." Has that happened, or is there a way to navigate this when you're in a group like this and you're trying to teach a subject like this, where what my fear would be of where it could go a little bit, maybe sideways? Does it almost is it protected by the simple fact that if your initial integrity is, or your initial intention is that I want the safety of all participants, maybe safety isn't the right word. Like I care so much about the people that are choosing to come and study with me that I value that so much, that that intention is so strong that even if something does go a little uncomfortable and hard to handle or deal with, that intention ultimately makes everything all right in the end. Does that even make sense?
Yes, I absolutely, it makes sense, especially from sitting where I'm sitting from, which is leading, having led many groups at this point through some heavy stuff. Um, it does get intense. And I
Like
can't
yeah,
say
I guess I would imagine
I
something.
have,
Yeah, yeah. I want to listen. I'm sorry. I want to hear what you were going to say.
um, I can't say I can remember a time when I was believing or thinking this is, oh no. No, but it, there have been some very strong things that have happened. And I'm, what to say, how to put this? I think it's the years of practicing yoga and meditation. You know, I have been also studying in trauma courses for the past few years. And the deeper I get into the study of trauma, for me, it's like, this is yoga. Really, this is the way that I have known yoga for all of these years that I've been practicing yoga. And I just from a different way to say it, a different perspective. But um, so I believe that all of the practice that I've done allows for an accessing of stillness, something that maybe you use the word protects or but it's just like the heart is all inclusive, and I think that presence is what is always needed, only needed, ever needed. And it does seem to just protect, I guess. I don't know if it's about protection,
Yeah,
but it is.
I see what you're saying because it's so I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, good answer. And I
How?
like the fact that you're delicately answering it with thoughtful consideration for each word because there is something about if the intention is really clear, even when things get very wobbly, that intention somehow fixes the wobble. If we stay with the process long enough, like if we're willing to really just hang in there and be present a little bit longer. I guess the reason that question came up is because I was thinking, and I'm glad you brought up trauma work in relation to sexual abuse trauma. And if somebody maybe is unaware that they were sexually abused because they have a repressed memory of it, they think, wow, I really want to go and somehow figure out why I'm having challenges with intimacy. They go to an
Yes.
event, and all of a sudden all this memory comes back and then
Yes.
whoa, because when repressed trauma comes up, it can get really like physical, it can get emotional. People can be screaming, yelling, having all sorts of like radical sort of reactions to that. And so that's where I guess my questioning was as a facilitator, as you being a facilitator,
Yes.
whoa, that takes some serious kahunas to like to go there with folks and to be willing to open into that space. And so I really applaud that. I think that it takes a lot of um like you said, I guess you've been working at this for a long time and you've been doing the work yourself. So that's why you're willing to go into the trench with others and trust that you can now help them navigate out of that trench again.
You know, I trust something outside of me. It's like sometimes, you know, when I get in there in that room, it's like it's not Susan, really. It's there's just something moving through me, and I've experienced it so much now that I just trust it. And also, there are very practical things that I do. Like it's very small groups that I take because, you know, the biggest group I've taken in a retreat is 10, and it was a lot for me. And that's when I felt my, okay, this energetically. So I normally take eight, 9 women, and I speak to them beforehand. We meet before. Usually, honestly, Todd, it's mostly repeaters. It's like every retreat, half of there's not tons of spaces, and then half of them are repeaters. And so it's a small group of people maybe that I haven't ever met before. And then we meet, and I tell them
Mm.
what's happening, what we're going to do to inform them and lower the levels of uncertainty and hopefully anxiety.
Very
So
cool.
it's conscious, there's things that I do to really inform everyone, make sure it's the right fit, that I can feel the other person out and that they can feel me out and that they know what they're getting into. And also I give them tools in the retreat, like of how to handle. That's what the retreat is how to expand that energetic container to hold everything that we're working with. So
Nice.
hopefully they're well equipped. And also, I encourage the therapy because it's happened, several times that the example that you gave, it's happened. And it's like, I am all for the getting some therapy to go along with all of this. And then I have a membership and I give it for free a month after the retreat so they can continue to integrate in community and in sangha. There's post care, there's pre-care, there's the care during the retreat. So it's all specifically designed to just hold a space.
This is so fascinating. Thank you so much. I really love
Thank
hearing about this.
you
I
for
love that.
having me on.
I love this subject, and I haven't really gone this direction yet on the podcast. So I hope those of you
Cool.
listening, if this resonates with you, please reach out to Susan. It's going to be really easy because all of the links are in the description. They can just click and, just reach out and communicate with you. And
Please do. I love hearing from peeps.
me too. Me too. I love it. Like if anyone is ever thinking, oh, they probably get so much email, they don't want to be bombarded. Like, no, we actually really love it when you send us a message. Like,
Yes.
and even if it's a
Yes.
message that you're like, ooh, that really pushed a button, or I didn't like that,
Right.
but then I
It's
followed through and listened
feedback.
to the whole, yeah, we really do like that because that's how we learn and grow. So I am, I think we did a great job. I feel really good about traversing the information that we set out to speak about today. Is
Me
there
too.
anything, thank you. Is there anything that you want to add as our conclusion?
Well, I just want to let people know where to find me if they would like to do some work, to do a yoga, sex, and death retreat. I am doing another retreat in Greece in May 11th, through the 18th. I believe it's 7 days, a 7 day retreat from Saturday to Saturday in a Greek island, a beautiful, beautiful place. And so, um, if this calls to you, if this work calls to you, let's set up a time to talk and see if Greece is the time for us to work together.
Yes. Twist my arm, why don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I also do silent meditation retreats, and I've got one of those coming in Los Angeles in May. And so all of that, just sign up for our email list
Cool.
on samarasacenter.com. I think you'll have that,
Yes.
right? You
Yes.
posted.
Yep. I have samarasacenter.com. We can find you on Facebook and X/Twitter and Instagram, all on the same handle. So you did a good job of securing that
I
name.
don't have X or Twitter.
Oh, I know it. Oh, on
No.
your website you did. You do actually. I
I,
followed you today. Believe it or not. Oh well, okay.
well,
Maybe I wasn't supposed
yeah,
to
we
tell you that.
haven't, we
All right,
don't,
sorry.
I don't, we're
Maybe that's a
very
fake
active on
account. Maybe that's a
it.
fake account. Don't follow her on Twitter. That's somebody else. Somebody else grabbed that name. That's a
We're most active.
misrepresentation. That's the Neo Tantric
Oh
people
no.
over there
Yeah, right. Todd,
messing with you.
unfollow. Unfollow.
Dang it.
You know,
Oh
we're
no.
most active on Instagram.
All right, cool. Me too.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Okay.
well, thank you so much. I hope to cross
Thank
paths in the
you.
future in person, but this has been a real joy and a pleasure. And
Yes.
thank you for bringing some professionalism to the table here. I really appreciate it.
And I thank you for the same. Thank you for doing what you do and just asking the questions because I'm all about the questions. So thank you.
Until next time.
Until next time.